She'll probably be over
We hope so.
Good to see you. It's rare you're here.
I know, right? Normally knocked everything over.
How you doing?
Oh, I thought you were like that with the end, Dennis.
All right, Mr. Hartman, I'm going to put you on speaker if that's all right. All right, you good? You there?
I'm here.
All right.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 14th, 2023 regular board meeting. I'd also like to announce that the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. At this time, if all would like to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time we'll have a brief moment of silent meditation. Roll call, Mr. Longwell.
Mr. Bradley.
Here.
Mr. Burkhardt.
Here?
Mr. Hartman.
Present.
Dr. Lebo. Here. Mrs. Maris.
Here.
Ms. Morgan.
Here.
Dr. Rhodes.
Present.
Mr. Sanker. Here. And Mr. Rupp.
Here. On to item 1.06, endorsement of agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda, Mr. Longwell?
There are no changes, Mr. Rupp. The agenda will otherwise stand as written.
Item 1.07, reading of minutes of regular board meeting of January 10th, 2023. Do any board members have any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, they'll be filed as written. Move on to item 2, hearing of visitors of items on the meeting agenda. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. At this time, we have reached the first opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments related to items that are listed on the evening's agenda for a vote. A second opportunity for public comment will occur at the end of the meeting. The second opportunity for public comment is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the podium, share your district name and district address. And this is for items that are being voted on at tonight's meeting. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, reports and presentations. Item 3.01, Superintendent of Schools report, Dr. Leining.
Thank you, Mr. Rupp. I have 2 items in my report this evening. The first is we have our friends from Northside Elementary School here tonight to share with the board. As the board recalls, last year we were able to get into each of our schools on visits. This year we decided to allow the schools to come in and present to the board about some things that are happening in their buildings. We also have 2 visits planned for this year, one of which we've already done. So tonight on the docket is Northside, and our principal, Mrs. Ashlyn Ecker, is going to introduce the topic is. Welcome.
So, good evening and happy Valentine's Day. My favorite part of the presentation tonight is that I get to do it with somebody that's near and dear to me. This is Mrs. Alexis Saxton. Lexi was hired with us last year in the district, and assured that she is doing wonderful things for our school, for our students, and for their families and our teachers. And she has been an inspiration to me in my own educational journey, so it's a privilege to work with her. So we are here to talk with you this evening about an evidence-based practice known as check-in and check-out. And it's a Tier 2 intervention that we implemented back in October, right? And we've had great success with it, and we believe that it's had a positive influence on students that have been a part of it. So I'm certain that you've seen this pyramid before of tiered intervention. In as much the way that we think about reading intervention or math intervention for students that are struggling, it's really important that we also have in place those same kinds of safety nets for students that are struggling with behavior. Because we know that if they're struggling with behavior, it makes it very difficult for them to access their academics. So at the Tier 1 level, these are things that if you've been on the school board for any length of time, and I know you all have, you've heard in passing the CATS norms, which is the elementary version of our district mission statement, which I know is in front of you. Wildcat Way is our school-wide positive behavior support system that is systematic through the elementary buildings. In all of our buildings now, our children start their day with morning meetings. We have quite a number of counselor lessons that all students get in class, as well as our monthly Wildcat community meetings. So those are just a few of the types of Tier 1 interventions that are universal throughout our building. But as I said, it's really important that we have safety nets, interventions that can help students that are not meeting success behaviorally. And that is where things come in at the Tier 2 and perhaps the Tier 3 level. So Tier 2 interventions are really geared towards groups of individuals students that have similar needs. And Tier 3 interventions are very individualized to specific students. So that's the nuanced difference. Particularly, we are here tonight to talk to you a little about check-in, check-out, and I'm going to let Lexi take over because she has truly spearheaded this, and I believe that it's one of the types of interventions that will see us into the future of school counseling.
Thank you, Ashlyn. So as she said, well, thank you for all your kind words, first of all. Ashlyn's been such a great support in, getting this up and running and just being there with me along the way for positive support and encouragement. But as she said, I'm Lexi Saxton. I'm the school counselor at Northside Elementary. This is my second year. And I had the privilege actually of doing check-in, check-out at my internship when I was completing my practicum. So this was not a new intervention to me. It's something that I was sort of familiar with, but was excited to kind of make it my own. So today we're going to talk about 4 different components, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into these as we go. But the first one, and one of the most important things in check-in, check-out, is each student receives a daily point sheet. In addition to that, they also receive frequent feedback, not only from their mentor, but also their classroom teacher. And then the reason the next bullet point is bolded is because this is arguably probably one of the most important parts of check-in, check-out, and it is that positive adult attention. This is a positive reinforcement intervention, and we'll get into the ways that the adults in the building reinforce through the incentive and the reward.
When you say mentor, who's mentoring them?
Good question. So myself and other adults into the building, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that as we go, but really good question.
Thank you.
All right. And I had the privilege of interviewing this absolute movie star at Northside Elementary. So I'm not sure, is there a way? Oh. Perfect. All right. Do you want to introduce yourself, your name, and your grade?
Yes, my name is Scarlett Willow, and I'm a in second grade.
Scarlett, can you tell us a little bit about check-in, check-out?
Check-in, check-out is a thing that kids get to use when they're at this school. If they're having trouble with some stuff, they can overboard this. They have this check-in, check-out sheet. So
we did some editing here and there, but we will dive in. As she said, check-in, check-out is for kids who might be having some struggles, and we'll get into some of those struggles and what those target behaviors aim to tackle. So what does it look like? A brief overview. Every morning when kiddos come into the building, they are greeted by their mentor. Their first 2 minutes of the day are spent checking in with their mentor. Once they receive their check-in sheet, as Scarlett had showed you in the video, they go to their class, and throughout the day they're receiving feedback from their classroom teacher throughout every period of their day. And then at the end of the day, they then check out with their mentor and receive feedback. So here's an example of a check-in, check-out point sheet, as Scarlett did show you in the video. You can see at the top, it just has their name and their date, and that check-in with their mentor includes goal setting. And our target goal for kiddos is to maintain at around 80% or more as they phase through the check-in, check-out process. So they set a goal for the day, and then they choose their incentive, which we will get into as well in the coming slides. And then you can see there are 3 target behaviors on this sheet. Obviously, the behaviors will differ depending on what goals the student has needs for. For example, this one just says safe, responsible, and kind. Scarlett will share her goals in the next video. But then you can see each block of time, it's split into each block of their day, and then they get a score based on their progress during that point of the day. And then at the end of the day, their mentor then scores their points. And if they reach their goal, if they meet their goal, then they receive a reward. If not, we'll try again tomorrow. So let's hear from our friend Scarlett again.
So Scarlett, tell me about your target behaviors that you're working on.
my target behaviors are kind, honest, and follow adult directions the first time.
So what happens if you get like a smiley face? What does that mean?
That means you get 2 points for that.
What happens if you have one of these faces? What does that mean?
The reminder, that's a reminder, and that frowny face, you get 0 points. But this one is really good. But these 2 are really good. This one, it's good, but it's okay if you don't get it. It's not good. This one says, let's say this together. I did it.
I did it.
I needed reminders.
I needed reminders.
I need to try harder and work hard.
I need to try harder and work hard. So is it a bad thing if you get frowny faces? What happens if you don't get a smiley face? What do you do for the next time?
You just try again next time.
So again, trying again, and that positive reinforcement is really important. It's never a punishment if you don't reach your goal. Yeah.
So, mentors, how many kiddos, I'm learning that term now, how many kiddos does a mentor usually have on a given day?
Good question. So I started the program in October, and I was kind of the first mentor. So I took 3 students, 1 from each grade.
Okay.
As I said earlier, Mrs. Ecker said in January, we were able, once we kind of got it up and running and I became comfortable with the system, then we were able to pull in some of the adults around the building, instructional aides who were free during the morning or had a duty that the kiddos could come meet. So we now have 8 total students. In check-in, check-out, we were able to use 5 more adults, and each of those adults has 1 student.
And is this currently only in your building? as of now?
To my
This is
knowledge.
a pilot or trial.
Okay.
Yes.
Are the 8 students because of resource constraints, or do we think 8 students are the right number that need tier 2 help right now?
Good question. I think that there is room to definitely include more students. I think an ideal number for a mentor to have would be anywhere from 2 to 3. I would say no more than 3. But I think right now, as we're just kind of getting comfortable with it, it just makes sense to kind of practice and everyone to have one.
And I think it's one of several tier 2 interventions that we have in place. She won't tell you, but she also serves many, many students in small groups. How many do you have? How many are in small groups?
4, right? Well,
So
how many students? I'd say about 20 total.
So that's a different tier 2 intervention. So we want to make sure that we match the intervention to the student need. Check in, check out is really where the function of the behavior is, that desire for adult attention. That is what motivates them. And so that's how we try to match the intervention with what the need is.
How do we define that's what they need? How do we know that going in?
So there's a variety of sources. We look at our discipline data, we looked at attendance data. There's a teacher nominating form that we utilize. If we feel it's appropriate, we can use observational data of observing the student in the classroom to help identify what the need is. And we've even had Therabilities, who you may be familiar with, has been an instrumental piece. They're also able to help assist us with some of what's the function of the behavior.
So the other programs already existed, or are they also part of the pilot program?
In regards to the other tier 2, those already existed. So as a school counselor, one of my roles is to, do interventions such as the small groups or such as other informal behavior plans, as Mrs. Ecker mentioned.
So that pretty much would be the same bill district-wide in the very
Yes,
short
and to my knowledge, I mean, all of the school counselors at the elementary level at least do small counseling groups with their students.
No, I was just saying, in the beginning, I thought every child was doing it, but now we're down to only 8, right?
Correct, yep.
Greg and I had seen a seminar a little while ago about a system where every child in the building, rates themselves, and I can't even remember, but, it was a good way to know which child needs reached out to that day, and I thought it was an excellent idea.
We're lucky to have a behavior screener now. At this point, we just use it for 3rd grade, but we use that, we have students rate themselves during the academic benchmarking period. So that's one of the sources of data that we use to figure out what kiddos might need certain interventions. So we're lucky to have that as well.
And I am familiar with what you're talking about. They come in, was it on the iPads? It's a program that you buy. Yes, I've seen that at a couple of conferences as well. And it's same temperature, like it's a temperature check. Yeah.
Exactly.
So our teachers do a lot of non-technical temperature checks, the greeting at the door. Our kids start with a soft start where, that gives the teacher an opportunity to kind of get a temperature check. Lexi and I, there's no student that comes in our building without walking past the 2 of us, so we're able to do like an initial temperature check. So this would be an intervention beyond just the daily temperature check, that we know that there's a pattern of behavior that is impeding their ability to learn.
So what are the incentives that students can earn, aside from just the adult attention being the biggest incentive? There are a number of other ones. These are just some examples. When we choose incentives and rewards, we want to make sure that they're not this amazing, great thing that's going to be hard to phase out later, because check in, check out is a 4-phase program. So as kiddos move through the phases, the incentives and rewards become less and less. And just something to note, the incentives are the same for all students in a grade in check in, check out.
What is a name change?
Good question. So
I'd be going for that every day. Call me something different every day.
So the kids, and there's like a specific one or two that like this reward, but we give them like a name tag and they just write whatever name they want on it, and then their teacher and classmates have to call them that. But coincidentally, they like to change their name to Mrs. Saxton, so I'm going into the room and they're calling the kid Mrs. Saxton, and I'm like, what? All right, Scarlett's going to tell us a little bit about some of the incentives.
So Scarlett, tell me about some of the things that you can earn if you get your goal of 80% or more.
Just follow through this. It says you can get coloring time, iPad time, watch school appropriate YouTube videos, library visit, change your name tomorrow, which would be fun writing utensils for tomorrow, 5-minute activity, Legos, fidgets, little spot sticker, paw print ticket, tell a joke to your class, be teacher's helper for a lesson, choose your seat for a lesson, listen to music.
What's your favorite reward to get, Scarlett?
The Scribble Spot and all the puppets. All right, Scribble Spot, what do you want to say to all the kids? Hello, my name is Scribble Spot.
All right, so show us where else we can find some rewards.
We can find some rewards over here, like we have Spot It. We have Don't Break the Ice, got Mustache Match, which me and Miss Saxton used to play when we had groups. We have Candyland, we have Legos, headbands, Connect 4. But one of my favorites is Mustache.
So who do you play these games with, or who do you do your reward with when you earn your goal?
I do this with Mrs. Saxton.
Or whoever your mentor is.
Yeah.
She's really excited. So here are just some pictures. As I mentioned before, we were able to expand this intervention and add 5 kiddos. So this is one of our aides and one of our students who started the program back in January, receiving his reward. That's Scarlett. And then just explaining the process to ask why we select students. We did kind of cover some of these things, but universal screener results. We have a pretty solid staffing process at Northside, and a lot of our kids, if we feel the need that this would be a good intervention for them, they might be referred via our staffing process. As Ashlyn mentioned, the counselor needs assessment, I send this out in the fall, winter and spring, and this just aims to capture observable, externalizing, and or internalizing behaviors that teachers are seeing. Mild acting out across settings, again, moderate behaviors that a lot of times kiddos may be motivated by that need for adult attention, just like that little guy right there. So mentors can be anyone. The goal would be to expand this to involve even more adults in our building, but right now, I mean, we do have, including myself, 6 staff who are able to do this intervention. So faculty and staff regularly in their rooms or office in the mornings and afternoons, and then adults with connections to specific students. So there's like 2 to 3 kiddos who go to breakfast in the morning, so we tried to pair them with some of the aides who have a breakfast duty just to make it easier. It's already an adult that they know and they see when they're coming in first thing in the morning. So what does that check-in look like first thing in the morning? It's very short and brief. It's 2 to 3 minutes. The mentor will give the students their checkout sheet. They'll set their goal and their reward and give them like a mini pep talk. And this is really, like Ashlyn said, that temperature check at the beginning of the day. And what's nice is they can kind of talk through how was your morning, how was your evening, and if there are specific concerns, this mentor then can kind of communicate that with the teacher so the teacher is aware of any carry-in potential behaviors that are occurring. The checkout is a little bit longer. This occurs anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, and this happens at the very end of the day, right before dismissal. So the mentor will then total up their points, and if they reach their goal of our goal for them and for them to phase out and move on to the next part of the program is 80%. So if they are reaching 80%, they'll discuss the strengths, maybe some struggles. And if they did reach their goal, this is the time that they do their incentive with their mentor. And if they didn't reach their goal, that's okay. We'll talk about, okay, what can we do tomorrow to reach our goal or to improve? And then the documentation piece is really important because this is how we then do like progress monitoring for behavior.
So is the 80% done on a daily basis or for the week? Daily?
Good question. Scarlett's going to tell us here in a second. Scarlett's your girl. Okay. Really good questions.
Just picking up on you. Asking all the questions too soon.
So Scarlett, was there ever a time where maybe you didn't reach your goal or you didn't get an 80%?
Yeah, that happened.
And what does your mentor say to you when you don't reach your goal for the day and you don't earn your reward?
Try again tomorrow.
Right. Are you ever in trouble if you don't reach your goal?
No.
No. What would you say to someone who didn't reach their goal?
It's okay, you're not in trouble. We're always here for you, and we always love you. Mrs. Saxton here, Miss Arts, everybody in the school loves you. And that's empathy.
And you take the sheet home and share it with your parents?
Yes, and then they sign it. Let's pretend.
I had to cut it off there because then she started like sharing her mom's name and what happens when she gets home. I was like, all right, we're gonna cut it off there. So here's a picture of just some other students checking out with their mentor at the end of the day. Me and one of my friends from October who, just in the past week has shown significant growth, and I'm really proud of him. So is it forever? No. If they're showing progress, we phase them out. To answer your question, so if they maintain that first part of 80% or more for 3 weeks, they're receiving their goal every single day, their reward every single day. If they are successful with that, then they move on to self-monitoring and weekly goals. Once they can maintain just a Friday goal or Friday reward for a couple of weeks, then they move on to surprise rewards. And then after that, it just becomes the simple check-in, check-out, and then eventually graduation. If they aren't showing progress, we might look to change to a different intervention. Maybe it's small group, or maybe we're even escalating to a tier 3. Maybe we're referring them for outside services or Therabilities.
Personalized behavior.
Yep, exactly. Personalized behavior contract, etc. All right, here's the one where Scarlett's going to tell us about the phasing system. And just to be clear, she is currently in phase 3 and will most likely be starting phase 4 when we come back next week.
So Scarlett, you have been doing very well with check in, check out. You've been reaching your goal and you've actually moved forward up to phase 3. Can you tell us about the different phases of check in, check out?
All right, so it's phase 1. Every day you get a surprise. If you go for 100 and you accidentally make an oopsie, you can do it tomorrow. But we have the sheet, and let's pretend she had 99. Then we put yes.
So you reach your goal and you get your reward every single day with phase 1. Can you tell me more about phase 2? Once you get
phase 2 is when you get your things. When you get your prizes at Friday.
So you get your prize once a week with phase 2.
But
you still check out with your mentor every single day.
And phase 3, you don't really get anything.
Yeah, and that's what you bring next. That's what phase 3 is. So what happens when you get phase 3? How often do you get your reward?
You get your reward never, sometimes. But in phase 4, so let's pretend I got 100, and today was surprise day.
So you get surprise rewards in phase 3. So you don't get as many rewards, but you still check out with your mentor every day, and you're still earning points.
Yep. And what I've been doing is I've been getting 100s every day.
Yeah, and once you get a couple of 100s, a couple weeks in a row, or 80%, then you move on to the next phase. If you're not in phase 4 yet, but what is
We have
phase
to
4?
do 3 weeks of it.
Yeah. And what happens once you're in phase 4? That's the last phase.
Last phase, you get to graduate almost.
All right, and just to wrap up, I did want to just share some of that progress monitoring data. These are the 3 students who've been doing check-in, check-out since October. So you can see, I mean, for all of them, they have a positive trend line, and really just in the past couple weeks, you can see, I mean, they're up there 90s, 100s, and I'm proud to report that the daily average of these 3 students in the program since October is a 92%.
Phase them out.
Yep, so we're gonna phase them out.
Never be rewarded again.
Yeah.
That's an incentive not to like phase out because you won't ever get a prize again.
I know, well, actually, I have had a kiddo who is kind of struggling with the thought of moving on because of that reason, so that's another discussion that we'll have to have,
That
so.
would be me.
Yeah.
So Scarlett deserves some surprise reward though for that.
Yeah, she is, and I mean, you even recommended, you're like, what if she would be a mentor, like after she graduates, like I think she would be.
She could handle it.
And awesome, I think she could, yeah, she knows this program through and through. Are there any other questions for us?
But thank you for, this program is a good program because a lot of times you only focus on those kids that are really, they've gone to that next level where they are the difficult, they're that 3rd level that you have to be concerned about, and catching the kids at that intermediate level where you can do small things to just change that behavior and put them back onto the right path, or at least make them feel less stressed, more comfortable, easier to handle the school day is a great thing. So thank you for the program that you put together. I can only imagine it's doing, not imagine, I'm sure it's doing great things and having great results for keeping kids away from that next more serious level. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
I just, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank both the administrative side and you and all your colleagues. I mean, what you do is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, many years ago, the late Charlie Ryder convinced me, early intervention, really, academically, emotionally, socially, mental health, all of it. It's the best bang for your buck you'll ever have. I mean, both in actual dollars and just, the cost of society, and crime. And I mean, what you guys are doing is great. Keep up the good work. And I want to thank all the other board members for being supportive, when we added positions and that it's money well spent.
Thank you for being supportive.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah. I've
keep up the great work.
I was just saying, I've worked in some of the classrooms too, and there are so many kids that just want to be acknowledged by adults. And I totally see that, and I've seen that, and they just want somebody to really pay attention to them. So I think there are a lot of kids out there like that, and this is a great program for that.
Absolutely.
It's all about connection and belongingness, so.
And I think there's a lot of great things that happen across the elementary buildings. And I think one of the next steps that we want to take is really capturing and harnessing the best of what's working and have it be very systematic at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So that's a great next step for us.
It's an excellent transition. I was going to say, we don't say to our principals what to come in and present to you. It's up to them. And so literally, I find out yesterday what the topic's going to be. That what's good about that is the fact that we do have a committee right now, Mr. Fitz, Mr. Bigham, working with a district-wide committee on the whole idea of behavior and how are we looking at it systemically through a school district lens. And so to hear about 3 students who have become 8 students might not sound like a lot, but the reality is that the system that we are exploring to put in place is something that can be consistent across the district. You would ask about, the different tiers, and whether we're talking about intervention in math, in reading, or in behavior, our goal is that the tier 1 that every student gets, that we're at an 80% of the students get it right there. And then 10 to 15 might need tier 2, and then 5 to 10% of the students may need a tier 3 intervention. If we can do better than that, great. But from a staffing and a resource perspective, that's how we look to build capacity in the entire system around these kinds of programs. So thank you both very much for giving it at the student level.
We're not going to make them check out.
I said
Don't
that.
have a point sheet.
I know. I said that earlier to someone though. Like it was one of the mentors. I was like, she was like really caught up that they like made a mistake or something. I was like, imagine if you had to fill out a daily check-in sheet. Like I know I wouldn't be getting 80% some days. Like in all seriousness though, like so.
Well, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
The second item I have tonight is the results of our bond sale. And so I would invite our partners from PFM and Stockton Leader to come on up. And Mr. Longwell, I'll let you introduce the topic.
That was an exciting topic. Now we're talking about municipal bonds.
Yeah.
Wow, how exciting is that?
That's right, that's right. So just by way of introduction, and I'll let them really deliver the good news, but we were in accordance with our financing plan and really moving our attention to the high school project. As the board recalls, we kind of had a 3-step borrowing associated with that. This was step 2 of the 3 steps, and the second step being $30 million borrowing. And so without further ado, I'll let representatives from both PFM and Stockton Leader make some introductions, and I think some of them are familiar faces, but also share with the board both the results and then some of the supporting documents that will need the resolution and so forth to actually move forward with the final results of the sale. So.
Thanks, Greg. I'll kick it off real quick. Before your place tonight, I think we put a packet of information on bond sale report, which I'll have Melissa want to go through with you this evening. But we're really proud to bring these results to you. I think things went very, very well. And we do have a couple new faces. Pat Doherty from our office, he was involved today, so he helped run all the numbers and things of the like. So we wanted you to be able to meet him. And then Kate Hines from Stockton Leader will be talking about the resolution. But with that, Melissa.
I get to say only good and exciting things. So I'm going to start on page 2. This is the interest rate chart. So when Brad was here in December, and I'm so sorry I was not able to attend, you'll notice that rates have fallen since he was here in December. And you might think to yourself, but I keep hearing that the Federal Reserve is raising short-term rates. Well, they are, and you can see that in the top graph. So just as a reminder, this is the Municipal Marketplace Data Index. So that is the index for if you have a perfect credit rating and you're issuing municipal bonds. And these gray bars, they show the highs and lows in each of the 30 years over the last 30 years. So since 1993 when our data starts. And what the blue line indicates is that's the current interest rates. And the red line is the historic average. So in the long end of the curve, which is where all of our bonds are, we're below historic averages. On the short end, in year 1, we're higher than historic averages. That's a great thing because it means we can basically borrow and invest at the same rate. Okay, so that means it's very efficient from a financing perspective. It means you're going to earn a lot of interest earnings in your construction fund. It means we got really good bond results today. So all good things. Page 3, this is the summary of sale results. The district received bids from 4 underwriting syndicates, 12 bids in total. The winning bid came from Robert W. Baird. They bid with AGM bond insurance, which you might recall we utilized bond insurance last time. And that's an upfront premium that you pay that reduces your overall debt service. Given the kind of structure and credit rating and size, we anticipated that it was likely that municipal bond insurance would be used in the current market environment. You'll note that Manufacturers and Traders Trust is your paying agent. They're your paying agent on all your other bonds, and your call date, so the first opportunity that the district will have to refinance the debt for debt service savings is November 15th of 2031. So that's an 8-year call feature. So that's pretty good for a non-bank qualified issue. So remember, non-bank qualified is when it's more than 10 million, which was the plan for this year. Page number 4 is just a summary of those bids. The next several pages are your credit rating report. I'll let you read most of it on your own time, but I always like to highlight the outlook. So S&P does a really nice job of letting us know what they're focused on for considering a rating upgrade or a rating downgrade. So on page 7, we could lower the rating if one-time capital spending or other budgetary challenges lead to a material decrease in the school district's current level of available reserves. So they're super focused on your fund balance here. They're saying, basically, you get your credit rating, you keep your credit rating if you don't spend your fund balance down too much.
Do we need to share this with all the news organizations that have been telling us that we've been doing shell games with our money and it's all a bad thing?
Yep.
Some of our fellow elected leaders over in Harrisburg
Yep.
see that same thing.
Upside scenario. We could raise the rating if the district's debt burden were to moderate. Again, they've known about the whole plan. We're going to get fairly highly levered. That's what it means when we have a lot of debt. We know that, though. That's been part of the plan. Were to moderate, which it will over time, and if wealth and income levels improve to levels we consider commensurate with those of higher rated peers while financial performance remains strong, which is basically them saying, your financial performance is strong. If you get significantly wealthier or significantly reduce your debt, that's, a potential upside. So just always like to highlight those things. I'd really encourage you to read the rest of the report too, but for the interest of time, those are the key details.
Also, the AA minus rating that we have,
Yes.
how does that compare? You talk about peer groups here.
Yeah.
Or S&P does. Where are we in terms of a peer group? I don't know, locally, or well, I don't know how you want to
Yeah.
categorize it.
So in terms of statewide, you're one notch better than the statewide average. So the average is an A+. So you're a AA minus, that's one notch above. And compared to kind of geographic peers, this is pretty on average to what most other folks have. There's some people that have, kind of the A+. There's some people that have the, the AA. It's kind of right in that average for this geography.
Well, that sounds good then.
It is.
Considering the amount of
Yes.
that we are taking on and the amount of work we have to do to keep up with enrollment.
Yeah.
I tell my clients I tell my clients if they're in the AA category, they should feel pretty good about that. That's good. That shows strong financial performance.
Did we not agree with this rating and we went back and asked them to reaffirm it? Is that?
You get a new credit rating every time you issue new bonds, and they take a fresh look at you every year, whether we issue bonds or not.
So I think the last time we had an issuance, we didn't have the 22 numbers, right? We didn't have 22 audits, so that kind of kicks it as well. New audit, new year. But Melissa's right. Every time we do an issuance, we need to send it to them to make sure they do a review. This is important. This report's important to investors.
And really, the market likes to hear an update on the credit rating, and so they like to see the most recent financial results. And so, draw a comparison to our personal finances, it's almost like going to get a mortgage or a home equity loan. Every time you do it, they probably want to learn more about your personal finances. And likewise with the district, they want to learn about how are things going, recently.
So, like the AA minus, is there a AA plus? Or,
yes.
And does it go up to AAA?
It goes up to AAA, so it starts at AAA. That's the best you can possibly have. There are 9 of those in Pennsylvania, between 8 unique districts statewide. And then AA plus, AA minus, A plus, A minus, and then we get into the triple Bs. Those are not so good. We don't want to be there.
Yeah, but if you, like I said before, I'll repeat, AA is good.
Yeah.
That AA is a good, solid. And that's probably why you got the bids you got.
And really, to your point, when you say AA, the modifier plus and minus, it's really AA minus, AA plus. In your view, if you're leaning in that trio of categories, that's correct. Yeah.
You think about it in terms of categories, because there's, from an investor's perspective, there's a jump. There's a jump between being in that AA category to the AAA, and there's a jump down to being in the single A. In terms of who can invest.
What tier was.
Yep, no,
Thank you.
Totally reasonable. Okay, page 11. This is the same summary that we've been looking at for years now. We are focused here on the purple column, so columns 4, 15, and 16. So if you were to take out, if you had your handout from December, you would see that this is several $1 million better than what we were estimating in December. And I will tell you that that's for a variety of factors. First, just the overall market getting better. Secondly, you guys got an awesome bid today. Like really, really strong. We did some preliminary estimates last week for Greg and Bobby to get the sizing right, and made reasonable estimates at that time that I did not think were very conservative, and just totally blew those out of the water. Without getting too nerdy in the technical details.
You are very excited.
I am. I am.
We all should
know
be.
yet. We just don't realize.
It's a big difference.
All very good news.
Yeah. Yeah, the results came in really, really strong. And specifically what we say when we mean really, really strong is we're looking at how your bond's priced relative to like that perfect credit rating we're talking about. And that's called a spread to MMD, and it was very, very small. So that makes us happy.
What is the impact of that on the rest of the sheet, or maybe you're getting to that?
I'm getting there, yeah. So what that translates to is it translates to lower debt service, and it's lower debt service by about 45,000 or so in column 15 in those upfront years. Most of the benefit comes out at the longer end, because that's where we're able to restructure, but it translates to a better column 24. So again, continuing to work on tightening up those additional funds to be identified. So for the purpose of this, we kind of left everything as it is. When we move forward kind of in the fall to start thinking about the final step, we'll be shoring things up with your administrative team, figure out how much really needs to be borrowed at the end, and how you guys are doing, compared to what you have in the budget. Because, when we are putting mills in place, we also know that your tax base has been growing, and we haven't been accounting for that in the plan. So hopefully we can shore everything up and bring that in even further a little bit.
I think, that $40,000 or $50,000 on an annual basis, when you really kind of gross that up based on 28 years worth of borrowing, then
it adds up.
It starts to translate to pretty large numbers,
Yeah.
7-digit numbers.
Yeah, so when I was looking at what we presented in December versus the bid today, for example, in the purple, if you look at the second number in the top box, construction fund, we were thinking we were going to get 29.6 million. We got 31 million. The amount of principal just above in order to get that money that we thought we were going to need to issue was 30 million. Now we only have to do 28,670,000. So we've gotten more money, we've issued less principal, and then the purple on the bottom of column 15, the very bottom number, we were at 66.7 million, we're at 64.2, $2.5 million less. So those are some reference points from 60 days ago. And as Melissa pointed out, market got better, strong credit rating. We had, obviously strong credit rating. We had demand for municipal bonds. Right now, there's a high level of demand for munis. And, those things all coupled together, those are the numbers, the bottom line numbers difference for the school district. So that's why I think your sense is the excitement. Not that I'm not. As a resident and a taxpayer, you're super excited.
Super excited. So the rest of the pages are kind of the backup to this. I'm going to stop now and take questions, and if you don't have any for me, Kate will go over the details of the resolution.
So the last column there, 24, that's also good news, right? I mean, that, as you said, that has come down a little bit. I know that not necessarily scenarios that we took, but as we were discussing it internally and with PFM, there were scenarios where that last column was around $1 million, and we weren't real comfortable with that, obviously. To get that down to the 800,000, I think that around 800,000 is a really big deal for us.
Exactly. And I think, to Dr. Light's point, that really is one of the three main areas of the financing plan that we've been monitoring, is that last column to say, how can we get that closer to zero? And we've been working that down. The district cash contribution, which is that column 22, and that's how we are using the reserves in the capital reserve fund to help phase in and step in those debt payments. And then the final piece is the phased-in millage, which we've been working on as well. So I think the final piece I just wanted to acknowledge and mention is credit to the board, the administration, the partnership with PFM and Stockton Leader. We're entering years 6 and 7 of a financing plan where we probably borrowed upwards of $170 million to finance all of our elementary projects, our secondary projects. We've phased in the millage. All the while, we've maintained stable fund balance. We've maintained a good credit rating. And so I think when you think about that long range of planning and the foresight that we had all the way back in 2016 and 17, I think to be here today is, I think, a really good place. So.
My question was like, when do you think it would be wise to even borrow money ever again? Like, I know this is a long-term thing that we've been working on for many years, but like, would you suggest at what year, like?
That's a good question. So there's a couple different ways to think about it. There's really 2 ways that we would think about it. First, borrowing capacity. Like, do you have the legal ability to borrow? And by the time we get done, we're going to be fairly close to your borrowing capacity. You have a little bit of room left, but not, you can't go do another $30 million project. And then there's affordability, right? So from a budgetary perspective, you know, do you need to give yourself a little bit of time to allow your budget to grow to accommodate what you've kind of already put in place? And so that's going to be really a question of like, how fast does the tax base grow? How does enrollment continue to trend?
Isn't the first question, what do we have another project, right?
Like,
it's not.
Why would we borrow?
Right, like I think that's sort of the first step.
You never know, like.
Well, no, I think, no, it's a real thing. Unless there's going to be a parachute drop of 1,000 new students, you know, next year, like I think the 170 million has been deployed to handle growth where we are. And I'm not trying to shut you down, Tracy. I'm trying to say, like, I think we would start with the need and then come to them with here's our thought, right? So, but I think we've hit all the buildings.
Well, we have, but you know, there's been talk about, do we need another facility building or something like that? So, I mean, I think there's things on the back burner here, and I'm just saying, how many years out do we have to wait before we can seriously start borrowing money for something else? That's all.
It's not 20 years or anything, I guess, is kind of to generally answer your question, but it's probably a couple.
I think in my mind, and I think these are all really good questions, and there's probably multiple pieces to it, but I think in general, as far as all the 8 academic buildings, we think we'll be in a good place. And, you know, the construction has positioned us well around our 3 pillars of program, enrollment, and mechanical and infrastructure. Now, maybe to Ms. Morgan's point, we do know from the facilities planning process, you look out the next 3 to 5 years, and we have had some conversations about, you know, what other facility needs might there be. But I think that's where you start to insert even the capital reserve fund and how much money we're managing over there. It's kind of our savings account, if you will, to help manage smaller to mid-range projects that are happening in the buildings over that 3 to 5 year planning horizon. And maybe the other piece, I think, again, a credit to the planning process, but the intentionality of how far out we're leveraging the debt, you know, and so when you look, where our debt takes us out to 2050, 2051, we didn't want to extend it out so far that we've hamstrung or committed a future board and administration that say something needs done in 25 or 30 years. I think we've left the future intact, and it's overall a good plan in terms of the length of the debt that we've borrowed. So.
And I just want to be clear that when we talk about affordability and the borrowing, that the light blue column is accounted for in that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're not.
This is the high school can be finished with the light blue column.
Okay.
We're very comfortable with that.
And I think to Dr. Letty's point, that ties a little bit to just how we progressed through these years of the financing plan, and we've been building it into our budget, we've been maintaining our reserves, and we're building our debt service up, knowing that we still have that $10 million left, to Dr. Letty's point, which I think is a good point. And then the final thing, maybe just to highlight what Melissa said, later this fall, we will plan to return to the board because there's some other factors that will probably play into this analysis that for instance, our assessed values have continued to grow, where that wasn't necessarily reflected in all of these schedules. And so that last column, I'd expect even by the fall, when we return to the ward, it'll be less than $800,000. And so that, I think, is one of the main things, is just to continue to whittle down that last column while we're building our budget up to meet the debt service requirements. So.
Yeah, I know nobody wants to say a number, but I agree. I was looking at that and thinking when we brought that in, that would be a significant reduction to that.
Plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yep.
Kate, would you like to go with the resolution?
So thank you again for having me. Again, my name is Kate Hines. I'm here on behalf of Stockton Leader. And you guys should all have the resolution in front of you, which is to authorize non-electoral debt for the issuance of your general obligation bonds, series of 2023, in the amount of $28,670,000. If you recall from the original resolution, we had $30 million. That was a placeholder in the resolution, and that's been changed throughout. This is a new money bond, so you'll see in the summary, which is the capitalized section, that the purpose of the bonds is to finance various capital projects of the district, to pay all costs and expenses associated with bonds, etc. The project is purposefully broad for flexibility for the district, and that is set forth on page 2. The project, the purpose is the planning, design, construction of additions, improvements, renovations, extraordinary repairs, for the acquisition of real estate rights and interests for, and the acquisition and installation of related equipment, machinery, furnishings for the various buildings and facilities, including but not limited to the high school, and then paying all the various expenses. And also note that the total estimated cost of the project, we are saying, will be in excess of the $28,670,000. All of the information that was discussed by PFM is included within this resolution. Throughout, it's been updated as of today. There are a couple things at the end of this that I'll note that have changed since the digital version was sent around this afternoon. But as indicated, the winning bid was by the Robert W. Baird and Company. And you are specifically authorizing the appropriate officers and directors of the board to sign any and all documents and take necessary actions as to the issuance of the bonds. As indicated, M&T Bank is your paying agent, and PFM is designated as your financial advisor. As far as the few changes since the digital version was sent around, on page 13 of the resolution, the very first paragraph, there was an error in the first call date for the optional redemption. That's been modified to May 15th, 2043. That's the correct date. And on page 19, we wanted to include the actual purchase price of the bonds from the Robert W. Baird and Company. So that's been inserted on page 19 as well. Otherwise, this is a standard resolution you've likely seen in the past in working with Steve. When you pass it, as a reminder, you're going to want to do a roll call vote. But otherwise, I'm here for questions if you have any on the resolution.
Question.
You guys are going to let me off the hook. First timer, thanks.
We've done this a few times.
Having questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your work. I have to say, I know you extend appreciation our direction. I have to say, I can't tell you how many times Greg and I would talk and say, call Melissa and Brad, see if they'd run this. Call Melissa and Brad, see if they'll run this number. And inevitably, not only did you do it, but you did it with accuracy, and we really appreciate your flexibility as we tried to navigate getting to this point. And there's still more to do, so hang in there. Thank you.
Well, assuming it passes the vote, are we going to be doing signing tonight, or are we going to be setting it for time?
I'm gonna stay till the end and get the
And
signatures.
then we'll do it after that.
And there will be a pre-closing as well, where we'll get additional signatures, but I'll stay for the signatures we need tonight.
Oh, you'll be here all night.
John, I do have one question. On page 19, item 6, why is it 31,179,000? I thought it was 28. 28.6.
They bid the bidder bid a premium. So
Okay.
they bid over $3 million of premium.
Okay.
for you. So that's why we were able to downsize the principal amount. It's different than a mortgage, when if you get a $100,000 mortgage, you get $100,000 for, sometimes, the way municipal bonds work is sometimes the rate is bid such that you get a premium, extra dollars. So that's why we downsized the face of the bond.
So since he brought up, so the actual bonds being issued will be for 31 million or for 20?
No, that's how much money you're gonna get.
We get that much
You
money.
you get 31
I got you.
million, 179, we'll pay closing costs, you'll wind up with $31 million. And then, but the principal amount of bonds that are needed to generate that amount of money is 2160.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Thank you. Yep, it's not always intuitive.
As always,
It's different.
you guys, you always seem to do a great job, so. keep up the
Melissa, you
good
brought
work.
better news than Brad did.
Thanks, guys.
I don't know, $31 million, $3 million. That was good news.
Well, I gotta get out of here and pick up some flowers from my
Yeah.
wife. And another discipline.
Oh, it's Valentine's Day.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
teasing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're not gonna stay if that's okay with the board.
That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Dr. Leidy. Move on to item 3.02, Capital Area Intermediate Unit, Mr. Bradley.
The intermediate unit met at the end of January, covered the, another round of budgets. Just as a reminder to the board, there are over 50 budgets that the intermediate unit has. Only one of them comes back to a vote to all the sponsoring districts. The other 50 are more are more day-to-day functional type things. So they gave an overview on that. I've mentioned a couple of different times and kind of sound like a broken record, but they talked about the Keystone State Challenge Academy, and they had graduated their first academy. They enrolled or started the second academy at the end of January with a total of 40 enrollees into that. And as a reminder, the funding for that academy comes from the state and federal government grants. There's no charge to families or school districts that are sending the participants into that academy. Construction is pretty much wound down for all the work that they've done in the Enola offices, just catching up now with technology stuff that they have to do to get everything in place. And they've done a nice job. It's a nice looking set of facilities. And then their forecast and budget again is there's no increase in contributions to the school districts that are involved in the intermediate unit for this coming year. So overall, a good meeting and a good set of reports.
Questions for Mr. Bradley?
We'll give them credit on their budgeting process. One of the things that as superintendents, we push pretty hard on are the administrative fees that are charged through the IU, and they have continued to reduce them. When I started, they were closer to 10%. They're now under 8%, I think maybe even 7.7.
Around 7.5 was the number they had given us.
Move on to item 3.03, Cumberland Perry Area Career and Technical School Report, Mr. Sanger.
Thank you. The JOC met on January 23rd. It was a regular meeting, nothing remarkable in our agenda items. We heard from students who were participating in the farm show, and then kind of future plans for the home builder show. I think they're doing dog houses, and so that's pretty cool. And then the dog houses are going to be up for sale, so that's kind of neat. I thought I'd mention I participated in the comprehensive planning process that the CTC went through in December and January. I was in one of the two meetings representing the board, but we got input from parents, faculty, and administration, and also the Occupational Advisory Committee members, which are basically employers that advise on each of the programs. So we had input from all sorts of stakeholders. At least the meeting I was in, we didn't have students, but I was only in one of the two. But still, it was good exercise, and that was pretty helpful in trying to set the direction for the future. The next meeting is February 27th. I plan to attend.
Any questions for Mr. Sanker?
The last school district that you're waiting, that's still pending?
I don't think that it's on the agenda until April or May for them.
I remember you saying it's
Yeah.
too far out, but I can't help but ask. Sorry.
That's as far as I know about that one.
So I will tell you that their new superintendent just got seated within like the last week or two.
Oh.
And we had a meeting earlier this week and he spoke very positive to moving forward, just needing some time himself to get a handle on the budget and what was going on there. But I think it's more a timing issue than a concern, if you will.
That's great news.
Questions for Mr. Sanker? Seeing none, we'll move on to 3.04, PSBA Legislative Report. I just wanted to bring out, I'm sure you all saw, that the Commonwealth Court ruled that the way schools are funded in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. And I personally think it will take years for anything to be done with it, if ever. There are like 6 or 7 other states where their courts have made similar decisions, and some of them 10 years ago, and nothing really has changed. So it's really one of those things, and really like where we would stand in it, I don't think it's possible to even know yet.
So if other states are further ahead than us going through the court battle, do you think ours could sell faster? Like,
I doubt it, because I mean, there's probably going to be an appeal to the decision, and that can get tied up. And even then, when you really go over it, there's many feel that the court actually lacks standing to even make that decision, that it belongs to the elected legislators alone, and the court doesn't have the right essentially to raise taxes. And really there was like the main plaintiffs in it were 6 large school districts, the NAACP, and also the Pennsylvania Association of Rural and Small Schools. So you can see where it's coming from originally, that those on the very end, low end, and those very high cost of the cities. So
But
where we would stand would be, nobody could answer right now.
But with the court putting it back into the hands of the governor and the legislature to work it out, they've put it back into the hands of, you said the legislature are the ones that need to make that decision. So the court didn't come in and say, we're going to fund it. They just came in and said,
Actually, I think she
you need to go
referred
back
to it as
the
a
drawing
nudge.
board.
Like
Right.
she said, I'm nudging you,
Yeah.
is, I think.
Telling you to go back and
Right,
go back to the
basically
drawing
saying
board,
it's,
figure it
you're
out.
not living up to the constitutional mandate, and it even went into there that, somewhere along the line, it was determined 50% of the funding should come from state taxation as opposed to the local taxation. I believe the last time they met, that was around 1980.
I say there was a time.
Yeah, and that, there had been years before that, and there was 1 year where they actually did, and then it's just continued to go back, so. And honestly, one good to come out of this is it might eventually, there might be some overturning of some of your old hold harmless decisions even.
With
If
the
there is a
Rural
new.
Association.
Well, that's why when you see who's
Does it
actually the
come out?
plaintiffs were in it, like, I don't see any of that happening. It's really, it's essentially to get additional maybe 5, 6, 7 billion into the basic education funding to get it up to where maybe the average school is getting 50% funding. I mean, Dr. Leidy might be able to go into a little more detail.
Well, I
We
think
can talk.
that always the devil's in the details, right? So what's the formula that they would use to distribute that money? Is the pie actually going to get bigger, or are they just going to redistribute the pie? There's so many questions to go with this that I'm not. I think it's intriguing from a legal standpoint that it came through, but from a very practical financial standpoint, I don't see us experiencing implications from this for quite a while, if any.
I think you mentioned here are the characteristics of those districts, but we also are unfairly funded based on the 50-50 idea, right? Since we're 75% local. So it's interesting that it really is, there's so many, you can't just say, well, it's all rural districts and it's all, or it's
They're
all
just the
urban.
ones who actually work.
I'm with you. I'm just saying it's not like saying only this constituency needs to be fixed. Like the funding needs to be addressed for many different districts and with many different profiles, right, including us.
I think they fixed it with the funding formula.
Right.
And they totally did if more money went through the
Right.
funding formula. And
As
so I
more
think
does, it will
I
in
think
100 years.
There needs to be a negotiation around hold harmless. And, when it first came to be, it made a lot of sense, fund them the same as they were funded last year. I think as we've seen these districts close and some of them have gone from 10 buildings to 1 building, you could certainly argue 25 years has been long enough for them to get less money year over year. And so I think if you make like a yearly calculator, which just adds another formula to it, complicates it, to say, you'll get this tiny bit less, so that you can adjust, maybe we can someday see some of that old harmless money go through the new formula and be equitably distributed.
Well, I see them doing like retroactive, so we'll all get a big lump sum here someday and.
Because it's gotta come from where? And unless you have a money tree, I don't see that happening.
I was
Well,
teasing.
the issue with the legislature is that some huge, I don't even want to say it publicly, there's a very large majority of school districts in the state of Pennsylvania that are either maintaining their enrollment or losing enrollment.
Yeah, actually, I was going to just bring that up. There's actually very few districts in this state. We've lost population in terms of the national population, hence we lost a representative seat the other year. And most of the growth is in only a handful of districts, and it happens to be in this county right now. Larry down in the Philly suburbs, fine. Yeah, he preached this for years when the growth was down there. Is the inequity is we're actually in one of the worst situations as far as it's districts with growth who are actually losing in the worst way. And the assumption is if you're a suburban school, the local people can just pay for it. So we're such a minority when you look at the number of districts. Pennsylvania has a declining urban population in our big cities and a very declining rural population. So and it hasn't changed for years. It grows only in a few pockets. And I just don't see us really, and maybe I'm a pessimist on this issue, but I don't see mechanics, River Cumberland Valley coming out.
Well, we don't have a lot of political clout in terms of numbers.
They took that away from us too.
The number of legislators who represent growing districts in the state of Pennsylvania is a very small number to get anything passed legislatively.
It'll be interesting, but the court did say it was unconstitutional, so that's a start.
It is.
I think to Dr. Lay's point, there's just so many layers to it that really, I think to put a number on it's probably between 100 and 200. If you were to put all the money through the formula, something like between 100 and 200 of the districts would be advantaged by that. All of the other 500, or whatever remains of the 500 districts would be disadvantaged by it.
380
right. So then you look at the state and the legislature, and it just so that kind of takes you back to Mrs. Maris's point. Then it probably would take a big infusion of cash into the formula. So there's just so many pieces to it.
I just find it amusing. This one issue is where the very far left in the urban areas and the very far right who represent the very rural areas is one issue they have like this common bond on. Like they feel the funding issue and they work together on it and they have the numbers. We'll see. That's all I have. Any questions on any other legislative issues anybody wants to bring up?
We need a house rules and all that to have many legislative issues to talk about.
Absolutely. Move on to item 3.05, Finance and Facilities Committee report. Mr. Sanger.
Yes, the committee met on January 24th. Here we had 4 items on our agenda. Many of those items are on the agenda this evening for consideration. First item was we heard from the district's auditor regarding the audited financial statements. Those are on the agenda for this evening. Next, Mr. Longwell went through the Cumberland Perry Area Career and Technical Center budget for 23-24. That's on the agenda for tonight. We heard about construction change orders from Mr. Kastner. There are change orders tonight on the agenda. And lastly, we heard about a new transportation services contract with Assist Services for additional transportation needs that we may have in the future. That's also on the agenda tonight. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for Mr. Sanker on the F&F committee report? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Sanker. Item 3.06, Board President report. I'd like to announce an executive session held on January 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Announce an executive session held on January 24th, 2023 at 9:15 p.m. to discuss personnel matter. Announce executive session held on February 14, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. to discuss legal, personnel, and student matters. and also announce the finalized board contacts, committee assignments, and representatives for 2023 are attached. We had actually discussed that at the last meeting. That concludes the board president report. Does anybody have any questions? We'll move on to item 6, new business, budget and finance. Item 6.01, treasurer's report. Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the treasurer's report as per the attachments, which include the following. Number 1 is the treasurer's report for January 2023. Number 2 is the board budget report for January 2023. Number 3 is the general fund invoices paid, check number 64916 through 65333 in the amount of $1,284,960.78. Number 4 is the electronic payments in the amount of $4,640,021.02. Number 5 is the general fund invoices payable, check number 65334 through 65362 in the amount of $879,580.13. 6 is the capital reserve fund invoices paid, check number 1846 through 1845 in the amount of $112,420.40. 7 is the Series AA of 2020 construction fund invoices paid, check number 232 through 244 in the amount of $2,203,610.32. Number 8 is the series of 2020 construction fund invoices paid, check number 246 through 247 in the amount of $98,458.70. And lastly, number 9 is the investment portfolio.
We have a second.
Second.
Any comments, questions, discussion on the treasurer's report?
Just on item 6, I don't know if I heard Ms. Morgan right. It's check 1846 through 1850. Just want to make sure we're all aligned with that.
Make sure, Mr. Longwell, that's in the record. Any other discussion on the treasurer's report? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 6.02, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to accept the audited financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2022, as per the attachment.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
6.03, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to approve the Cumberland Perry Area Career Technical Center budget for 2023-2024 as per the attachment.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
6.04, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to approve the Capital Reserve Fund budget for 2023-2024 as per the attachment.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 6.05, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to approve the transportation services contract with Assist Services LLC as per the attachment.
There's a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless
No.
Unless I hear a negative response, otherwise Ms. Morgan's vote will be recorded as an A, but any others, I'll otherwise record the roll call as unanimous vote.
6.06, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to authorize the administration to proceed with the issuance of general obligation bonds series of 2023 in the total principal amount of $28,670,000 to fund various capital projects of the school district, which includes the high school renovation project 2.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell, I believe we need a roll call vote here.
Yes. So the roll call will begin with Mr. Bradley.
Yes.
Mr. Burkhart,
Yes.
Mr. Hartman,
Yes.
Dr. Lebo,
Yes.
Mrs. Maris,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
Yes.
Dr. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mr. Sanker,
Yes.
and Mr. Rupp.
Yes. With unanimous consent from the board, the resolution to issue the debt will pass. Thank you, Mr. Lala. 6.07, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the tax policies report as per the attachment.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. We're going to item 8, new business, facilities, item 8.01, Mr. Sanker.
I make a motion to approve the construction change orders as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. Item 9, new business, personnel, item 9.01, Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the personnel report as per the attachments.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion on the personnel report? Mr. Longwell.
A lot of years on that. Sorry, just wanted to note that just at the top there with the administrative staff resignations, just 68 years with the first 2 people, so pretty amazing.
Yes, sadly, we're losing some true talent to
Yes.
retirement, but I wish them all well. Any other comments on the personnel report? Discussion. Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. Item 9.02, Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the salary adjustment for the superintendent in the amount of 3% plus a 1% performance bonus effective November 1st, 2022.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. Item 10, new business, policy, item 10.01, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 218, student discipline, as per the attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. 10.02, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 227, controlled substances paraphernalia, as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell. Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote. 10.03, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to adopt the agreement and waiver of hearing before the Board of Directors between parent, student, and the board, and the terms and conditions set forth therein. Direct the superintendent to place said agreement in students' education records. Authorize the superintendent to act on behalf of the board in implementing the agreement, and order the expulsion of the following student. Student E of the 2022-2023 school year, beginning February 1, 2023, for 1 calendar year.
Second.
Second.
Do we have any further discussion?
I'd just like to say that this is one of the hardest things that we hear about, students getting, not being able to attend the school in their normal capacity. But I will say that it makes it easier knowing that every time the administration does their best for the students and make sure that the student is placed in a position where they can grow and continue their academic progress. So this is super hard when we do this, but I think as a district, we handle it really, really well.
And that also has to be extended to the board members who also agree to, sending them to placement. What's better for the student, not
Yes.
necessarily what would be the most cost effective or,
100%.
there's such an effort, as earlier with the presentation, with the elementary buildings. the well-being of the students and that they're placed where it's best for them. Yeah, we all support that. Yeah, I think that's great. Any further discussion on item 10.03? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Moving on to item 12, hearing of visitors. We have reached the second opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon this evening. Reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable quorum. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the podium, share your district name and address. And this is for items that were not voted on tonight. Ready? Public comment. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Robert Schaefer. I live at 904 Peachtree Drive in Brown Township. There was a little aside earlier during the presentation by the bonds people about referring or alluding to the Attorney General, the Auditor General's report, which alleged that certain school districts hide money in order to then raise taxes. So that was not an issue that you voted on, but I'm wondering if there is a response either by Dr. Leidy or by the board to Auditor General DeFore's allegations, either in general or with regard to Mechanicsburg in particular.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, normally we don't engage back and forth during the meeting, but I will tell you that that was a report that came out that I think you saw an example this evening of why that was really a one-sided report and didn't take into account the full scope of what our responsibility is, especially as a growing district where we really have to borrow money. And you heard what the credit agencies do when we actually have fund balance, at the end of the day, saving taxpayer money.
Any other public comment on items that were on the agenda, that were not on the agenda for a vote? Right, seeing none, before we move on to item 13, Paul, I'd like to thank you for your extra effort on tonight with the live streaming, and also you, Ryan, for being a test case on doing it from that angle. So just thank you for your time and for being here. At that time, we'll move on to item 13. Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? Second. Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah. So you run. I just wait. Are you the first part? I don't even know what that is. Are you gonna file to run? Or are you just?